Hello! Today I'm going to be showing you how you can bulk manage customer store credits in Shopify. Now I'm going to be showing you how you can set, add and subtract credits. All three of these will be separate parts of the video, so if you would like to skip to a specific part, there will be timestamps in this video so you can get to that part easily. So let's get started. Now we must start by heading to the Matrixify app. So here I am in my Shopify admin, and from here we then need to head to Matrixify. And once in Matrixify, we must create a new export. So to do so, click on the New Export button, and this will bring you to a new export page. From here, you can then select the format you would like to export in. I'll be exporting it in the Excel format, however you can also export in the CSV format if you would like. Then moving on to Sheets. From the Select Sheets drop-down, select to export customers, as I've already done so here. Then click on the Customers drop-down and you'll see all of the different column groups for customers. In our case, we must select ID and email from the Basics columns drop-down, and also select to export store credits. So make sure these are selected as well. You can then also add filters to your export to export only specific customers if you would like. You can use any of the filters here, it's completely up to you. In my case, I won't be adding filters to my export as I will be exporting all of my customers. You do not need to change any of the export options. The default ones will work fine and as they should. And if all looks good, you can then go ahead and press export. Once the export has finished, you can then go ahead and download the exported file by pressing the Download Exported File button. You'll then see the file downloading and click on it to open it. Here I am in my exported file. Now you can see I have exported 3 customers and my file contains 4 columns. So we have ID, email, store credit currency and store credit balance. Now the main columns in this file, the mandatory ones, are ID, email and store credit currency. Store credit changes are applied as transactions for a specific currency store credit account, not by setting the balance amount. So this means that store credit balance as a column can't be imported, but it can be exported. So in which case you can keep this column in the file or you can remove it, completely up to you. But it is really handy as reference to keep in the file when creating the import to add, subtract or set store credit. Now to set, add or subtract store credit, we actually need to add 4 more columns to this file. So those 4 columns would be store credit transaction command. The next column would be store credit transaction amount. The third column to add would be store credit transaction send receipt. And finally, the last column to add to these 4 would be store credit transaction expire at. So for all of these things that we would like to do, which would be set, add, subtract, we do need these 4 columns. So make sure you have them in your file. Now I'm going to be starting off by adding a store credit transaction, and I'm going to be doing that for the first customer in my file. So follow along to see how you can add a store credit transaction. Now I'm going to slightly zoom in here so you can better see what I'm doing and the values that I'm adding. So again, starting with the first customer here, adding the store credit transaction. Now the first value that we're going to be adding is in the store credit transaction command column. And the value that we're going to want to add here is credit. For the next column, store credit transaction amount, this would be the amount of credit that we would like to add to this customer. So in this case, I would like to add 15 euros to this customer. The next column we have is store credit transaction send receipt. And this is exactly what it sounds like. Would we like to notify the customer that we've given them credit? In my case, I do not, so I'm going to add false. If you would like to trigger Shopify to send out a notification about this store credit though, then you would set this value to true. However, in my case, it is going to be false. And as for store credit transaction expire at, here we would add the date that we would like this credit to expire. Now, this value must be in the future, because if you add a date in the past or doesn't have a value, meaning you leave it empty, then Matrixify will just ignore it. So make sure that this date is a future date if you would like to set a value for this column. So in my case, I'm going to add 2026 0527, and that would be how you can add a store credit to a customer. One thing to note about these last two columns, which would be store credit transaction send receipt and store credit transaction expire at, these values can only be set for credit transactions. They can't be set for any other transaction. So just keep that in mind when setting up your import. Now moving on to subtracting store credit. And this is what I'm going to be doing for the second customer in my file. For this, we only need to use two columns, which would be these two columns here. So store credit transaction command and store credit transaction amount. In the case of subtracting, instead of the value credit, we need to add the value debit. And then in the store credit transaction amount column, we'd add the amount that we'd like to subtract. So in this case, I'd like to subtract 10 euros. And again, as mentioned, these columns are not needed for any other transaction type other than credit. So they won't have a value for the debit transaction type, so they can be left empty. And finally, moving on to our third customer in the file. And for this customer, we're going to set the store credit to a specific amount. Again, we'll be doing this using only these two columns here, exactly the same as we did for debit. And in this case, as the store credit transaction command column value, we're going to be adding the value set. And then for the store credit transaction amount column, we'd set the value that we would like the store credit to be. So in this case, I'm going to add the value 40. And Matrixify will automatically calculate whether to apply a credit or a debit transaction so that the final balance equals what you specify in the store credit transaction amount column, which in my case is 40. And it really would be as simple as that. That is how you can add store credit, subtract from store credit, and also set store credit to a specific amount. Now, it's also possible to add multiple transactions per customer. So let's say I'd like to add another transaction for my first customer here, in which case I'm going to insert a row, copy the ID value, copy the email value, copy the currency value, and here I'd add credit, and then add, for example, the amount that I'd like to add, and the transactions will be applied in the order that they appear in the file. So just so you know, you can also add multiple store credit transactions to a customer in the same file as well. Now there's one more very interesting column that you can add, which is an optional column, but it's also a very handy column to know about. So the column that you can also add to this import is called Store Credit Transaction ID. Now, as mentioned, this column is optional, and if you fill it, Matrixify will check whether a transaction with that ID already exists for the customer or if it has been added previously. If it does, Matrixify will skip it instead of creating a duplicate. So for example, I can add the value 123456 just as an example, and this will then be the transaction ID that Matrixify will save within an app-owned meta field for this store credit transaction, which in this case would be a credit store credit transaction. Now, this is really useful for scheduled or recurring imports where the same file might be processed more than once. As previously mentioned, Matrixify stores previously imported transaction IDs as an app-owned meta field on the customer, so deduplication works even for transactions that were originally created by an earlier Matrixify import for the same customer. So just to keep in mind, this is a handy column to have if you are scheduling your imports and say importing the same file multiple times, just so you don't accidentally get duplicates. Otherwise, you can leave this column out of the file. It's not mandatory by any means. You can just keep it very simple with the 4 columns that we have been previously working on in the video. And that really would be it. If it all looks good and as it should, you can go ahead and save this file and we can move to the Matrixify app for import. I'll go ahead and save my file now. I'm going to just save it as the same export that I exported as. However, you can save the file as whatever you would like. It's completely up to you. And let's head back to the Matrixify app. Here I am in the Matrixify app, and this is where we're going to be importing the file that we have just saved. So to do so, click on Add File, select the file we've just created and saved, press Open. You'll see the app analyzing the file, and once analyzed, you'll be able to see that Matrixify has correctly identified that we're importing customers. That in my case, I have a total of 3 customers in my file. In your case, you will see the total of customers you have in your file. But as mentioned, store credit balance cannot be imported. It can only be exported. However, if you do import it, it really won't make a difference. It will be just ignored by Matrixify. And if all looks good and as it should, you can go ahead and press import. You'll then see the app importing. And once imported, you'll be able to see that everything has successfully been updated. And that really would be it. That is how you can bulk manage customer store credits in Shopify using the Matrixify app. So how to set, add, and subtract these store credits. Now, we also offer a great written tutorial on this as well, which goes through everything that I've just gone through in the video, but in written format. And I will also leave a link in the description of this video to this written tutorial so that you can get to it easily if you prefer following a written tutorial rather than a video tutorial. And if you have any questions, queries, or concerns at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We will be more than happy to help you. Now, you can reach out to us either via Slack, email, or in-app. On our website and in app, you will see a speech bubble, and if you click on it, you will be able to ask any questions to our AI support assistant, MyBar. And to note, on our website and in the app itself, this is purely AI. For Slack and email, our human support team are also there to help. In Slack, we will definitely jump in if needed, and the same goes for email. We will confirm any answers that MyBar provides, or of course, additionally provide any extra help if needed. But that really would be it from me today. That is how you can bulk manage customer store credits in Shopify using the Matrixify app.